let me bring on a guy who is the former assistant U.S. attorney. His takes on the law have been exploited by media from the O.J. Simpson trial to today, when he's on Fox News Channel, believe it or not, talking about the Murdoch murders. But today and every Thursday, he offers legal takes on everything from the Trump cases that continue to grind through the legal system to the voting cases that continue to grind through the legal systems. I mean, things is like redistricting. And today, it's abortion. Please welcome the great David Katz, everyone. David Katz. Hi, David.
Hi, it's great to be with you. And just for your listeners, I don't want to be typecast by being on with Trace Gallagher at Fox News. I love being on with him, and he's terrific on these crime stories. But I'm probably better known to your audience for being on with Pat Thurston. And
yes,
Pat
right.
and I were on for 4 years together, along with Kim, of course. Hi, Kim.
Kim,
Can you hear me?
Kim was muted. Yeah, she was. Yeah.
Oh,
Kim's catching lunch while
we're
during
by the way,
segment.
some people wrote in and said it's great that Pat Thurston's landed on her feet and she's reading the news. She's doing a lot more than reading the news. She's doing commentary at the 7 o'clock hour at 8 p.m. And she had me on 3 times within a week to talk about the Nichols, that poor fellow in Memphis, who was chased and handcuffed and then beaten to death by 5 or more police officers in Memphis. So she had me on 3 times to talk about that and also to talk about Trump. And one last thing, I've been able to get a hold of her at 7:40 a.m. down here in L.A. because it's in the evening. And somehow it at least comes on my dial most places that I drive around. It's AM radio, but it's 7:40 and it's in Southern California. You can hear Pat Thurston.
What?
Oh, well, I will say this. She's brilliant. I love Pat. And I'm so glad to hear she's doing more there because I consider her a mega talent. And I'll be honest with you, we all need to work. And I love that she's working, and I love that she's at KCBS. I feel she's a Formula One race car driver, and she's driving a shuttle bus to the airport right now. So I love that.
And Mark, she's not competing with your time slot because she's in the evening.
No, that's true. That's absolutely. Look. I said it before, but I'll repeat it, and then I want to get into some substance also on the law. I heard you on Pat Thurston's show, and I would regularly text Pat, and I called her in that case after her show, and I said David Katz is the best guest on KGO. I don't mean the best guest on the law. I don't mean the best guest on your show. I mean the best guest on any show on KGO, David Katz. So I'm so proud, happy, and frankly, a bit intimidated to have you on my show. So thank you.
Mark, one last comment. You're really too kind because they've had so many great guests on KGO. You know, they covered I know that's the old station, the station that shall not be named. But, they covered COVID. They did such a great job of covering COVID with those world famous virologists. They covered everything, so well on that station. It's really like a loss to the public interest. And it's really kind of a tragedy talking about public policy that, as valuable as it was, it couldn't be saved for the tremendous public service function. But I guess, that's our capitalism. What did President Biden call it the other day? Humane capitalism? Well, it wasn't so humane or great in that particular instance. But apparently what they're doing now, they think sells better. My own thought that it was a very bad bet.
No,
but anyway, let's do the abortion case. Let's do this horrible abortion thing that's rearing its head in Texas.
Yes, please. So when you look at where these abortion decisions have led us so far, you look at a Christian right radical Supreme Court that has overturned Roe, but that same court and that same crew that has been clamoring for the overturn of Roe is really clamoring to take away abortion rights from women across the board. And so we come to this next chapter of it, which is associated with medical abortion, that is to say, the abortion pill, if you will. I wonder if you could speak to where this sits with a judge that is himself a Trump-appointed Christian right radical judge?
Well, it's hard to know where to begin, but let's begin with the judge. We've gotten into this situation now where, since they got rid of the rule that there had to be 60 votes in the Senate, they got rid of the filibuster on judicial nominees. And that's a whole long story, but that would keep judges, quite in the center. That would make them tend to keep federal judges in the center of the legal debate, not to have fringe judges on the right or on the left, for that matter, right? But with the demise of that rule, you had these very radical judges picked by Trump, and this is one of these radical right judges. When people say, "How could this happen with 51 or 52 votes and 48 senators screaming that this person was totally unqualified, that this judicial nominee was an absolute ideologue who had a political agenda"? This is one of those where you don't have Romney or Murkowski to thank, because Romney and Murkowski could have stopped him. Collins voted against this judicial nominee, but all of the so-called moderate, enlightened Republicans, and I have loads of friends who fall into that category, really missed the boat on these super radical judges. And so we have this judge in Amarillo, Texas, who came from, what they call a Christian rights advocacy group to the bench. Now, he was an assistant U.S. attorney like I was, and he handled appeals for a long time. He went to the University of Texas. So, he's obviously intelligent and capable, but he has these very radical views. So what happens right now is that since these organizations can complain anywhere, Mark, they can cherry pick these cases, they direct them all to this one judge. I hope your audience is sitting down or holding their breath or not holding their breath, because this is the same judge from Remain in Mexico. They steered the Remain in Mexico to this judge in Amarillo, Texas, and he ruled the way the arch right-wingers wanted him to. And now people are very scared he's going to rule the way the arch right-wingers want him to in this case. What the case is about is there's an abortion pill. I won't get into all the medical aspects of it, but apparently half of the abortions in the country or more are caused by this kind of morning after pill. So women take this morning after pill. It has a particular, scientific application, but it quite effectively, if taken within, I think it's a week or so after a woman believes that she might have gotten pregnant, aborts the pregnancy, for lack of a better. It vindicates her right to choose, and to choose quite promptly. It's very, very safe, and it's been used for over 20 years. Now, despite the fact that the FDA has approved it and it's been safe for over 20 years, this Christian rights right-wing organization has gone to this particular judge and argued to him that no, after 20 to 22 years of its use all the time, it really is dangerous. The FDA didn't vet it properly, and they make this legal argument, which is that they say that this particular pill, they didn't really consider the health consequences, and it's more dangerous to women, which is, of course, absurd to argue that it's more dangerous than going through a pregnancy. But they say that it's not a sickness, it's not an illness. That pregnancy is not any of those things. And the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is supposed to deal with illnesses, to deal with bad medical conditions. Pregnancy is not one. And so all the courts, they argue to this right-wing judge, all the courts have been missing the boat for over 20 years. And this FDA rule is no good, and women should not be able to get a hold of this pill. They shouldn't be able to use it. It should be against the law to sell it in a pharmacy to women who are seeking to use it for that purpose, which is just about all the women who buy it. And therefore, this judge ought to issue a nationwide injunction because it's supposedly dangerous, and it's more dangerous than the alternative, which is an unwanted pregnancy. They argue, I think, absurdly. He should issue a nationwide injunction, and people are really worried that on Friday he's going to do so.
You try not to hate people, but sometimes it's hard.
I hear where you're coming from. I really do.
Yeah.
They say that the same thing happened on the left. They say that these cases were steered to judges in San Francisco under Trump, and they issued a nationwide injunction. I think one was supposed to be under, remember, the Muslim ban? And the idea was that if the Muslim ban was an affront and against our Constitution as to people just because they, had the Muslim religion. It shouldn't be allowed in San Francisco. It shouldn't be allowed nationwide, and there shouldn't be a ban on travel into the United States because of your religion, for goodness sake. And the argument is that these kind of cases sometimes are appropriate for a nationwide injunction. Just a little history. Before about the mid-'60s, although they existed, it was unheard of to have a nationwide injunction. The idea was that if you sued in the Northern District of Texas and you won, you got a ruling that was valid within the Northern District of Texas. If other districts around the country thought it was persuasive, the same group could go to court and they could say, see how persuasive the ruling was by what appears to be a very right-wing judge in Texas. But you could go to New York City, you could go to San Francisco, you could say, look how persuasive this is to the federal judge there. You ought to do the same thing. But in the last 20, 30 years, it's become more normal to have these nationwide injunctions. And at least by some statistical counts, there were about 20 under President Obama. And then, of course, with all of the things that, in my opinion, were extreme and anti-constitutional that Trump was doing, they magnified to about 40. So you can imagine the Republicans are licking their chops and saying, okay, good for the goose, good for 40 nationwide injunctions against Trump policies. Watch us, watch the judges that Trump put on the bench. Let's see if we can do even better than 40 and have nationwide injunctions. Now, the Court of Appeals can knock down the nationwide injunction. As fast as this judge could issue it on Friday, the federal Court of Appeals, called the Fifth Circuit down there, could reverse it. But what's worrisome is that the Fifth Circuit has also, in the opinion of a lot of people, been packed with Trump judges too. Just they're on the appeals court now. And of course, the even scarier thing is, where do you go from the Trump-packed Fifth Circuit to the Trump-packed U.S. Supreme Court? And if neither one of those courts, the Fifth Circuit or the U.S. Supreme Court, stays the decision of this judge, his nationwide injunction would stand. Now, I don't think things are really going to go that far. I think this position is outlandish. And I think if the judge really does pull the trigger on this, to use a good old Amarillo, Texas expression, if he really does pull the trigger on this and knock out the right of half the women seeking abortions in America are doing it this way. They're doing it with this pill, which again is very efficient and effective. The plaintiffs have shown no evidence that I'm aware of that it's not effective. To me, this whole thing is concocted by a judge who apparently is entertaining this concocted argument. But I believe that if the judge really does go through with this, that even the Fifth Circuit will stay a nationwide injunction. But if they don't, it will affect us. Nationwide injunction means that women in Southern California who need this pill, whose friends have used this pill, who've used it safely year after year, cannot go and buy it. That's what it means if it's a nationwide injunction.
That is exactly right. David, we're going to take a break. I want to talk to Steve Moskowitz, but I'm so glad that you cast so many great things here. The history and also the reality. I mean, it is crazy, but this throwback attitude toward a woman's agency when it comes to the law and it comes to her own body, that is something that is really threatened in California, in blue states. This is not the kind of thing where they go, oh, well, we have this reflexive law that goes into place now that Roe v. Wade's been overturned, and so we're outlawing abortions in Mississippi and Arkansas and Alabama, etc. No, this would be nationwide. I love that you made that point. More with David Katz as we continue. And now back to our conversation with David Katz. We were talking about the reality, and this is kind of what I want to pick up on, David, the reality around a real abortion ban, as we were saying. And I love that you drew out the history, and I'll just quickly underscore it, and then I'm going to shut up and let you speak. But there was this love affair that was happening on the left and among certainly mainstream Democrats, particularly as it was so clear that Donald Trump was this corrupt, pay-to-play type figure. There was a love affair that was growing, and I still think it's out there, with people like Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney and people who spoke up against Donald Trump. And what I would always remind people is, look, I'm glad they're speaking up and speaking the truth to political power, in this case, Trump, but these aren't your friends. These are people who are against a woman's right to choose, for example. And you have just pointed it out. They approve judges that are now threatening a woman's legal agency over her own body. David?
Hello?
No? Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, that's certainly, part of the political and ideological divide in this country, that it's nice that Romney, voted in the Senate that he would have convicted and removed Trump. And it's, very nice that Liz Cheney did what she did. But, generally speaking, this group of the Republican Party is for huge, I would say, bloated military budgets. They're against environmental enforcement. And so if you see the need for regulations and for doing something right about the environment as a real priority, they're not your friends and have not been, on those issues. And on top of that, when you look at federal judges, certainly in terms of people's constitutional rights, if all you knew about a judge was that the judge was appointed by a Democratic president or a Republican president, I think any civil rights lawyer and just about any criminal defense attorney would say, I'll take the Democrat appointed judge if I don't know anything else about them. That's how differently it skews in terms of, generally speaking, federal judges and their views of, expanding constitutional rights, and this is certainly a huge cutback of constitutional rights. And I think no one can miss the fact that it was 5 Republican appointed justices who voted for it, a 6th one, Roberts, who would have not gone as extreme as the other 5 did and actually overruled Roe v. Wade in Dobbs. But there were 6 justices who were hostile to a woman's right to choose, and, a woman's right to what a woman decides that the woman wants to do with the woman's body. And so there were 6 Republicans on that side, and there were 3 Democrats on the side of women's right to choose and of women retaining that constitutional right. So I don't think that should be, missed by anybody. And when it comes to these judges, these extreme, almost fringe right-wing judges like this one in Amarillo, Texas, they kept winning on, votes 51-49. And some of the worst Trump appointments were 51-49. Remember some of the really worst cabinet members, some of the ones who are, hopefully we're forgetting about some of them, but some of them did unforgettably bad things. And they, again, won on this very partisan Republican majority. So, people are entitled to their political and ideological views, but I think they have to come to grips with that. And in the decision that you're talking about right now, Mark, it may have infuriated some of these right-wingers and the ones who are against women's right to choose. But this was how most people had their access to doing something about abortion. As things stood right now, as they stand, as it's being challenged in this Texas lawsuit, a woman has a right to get basically this pill through the mail. So there's no stigma, no ability of other people to give her a hard time, like when a woman goes to an abortion clinic, because it's gotten past the time that the morning after pill would work. And so now, these young women, a lot of women of color, a lot of women who don't have much money, they're, forced to drive all over the place in Texas and Louisiana just to go to what few existing abortion clinics there are. And then they get harassed by these, hecklers in the name of First Amendment. Suddenly the right wingers believe in the Constitution, right? When it's the right to scream at women, vulnerable women, as they're going into abortion clinics. So this would make a real huge difference. But I do think that while people should be worried about it, I just don't think this is going to become the law. I don't think that this is where we're going, that the U.S. Supreme Court is ultimately going to say that you can't even get the morning after pill because it's so dangerous to your health. It's so much more dangerous than an unwanted pregnancy is to a poor woman or a woman in desperate need of getting an abortion for whatever reason. I just don't think that's going to be the law of the land. But you see what people are saying, how it emboldens these judges and it emboldens these advocacy groups. They go in and they argue for anything. They got another order down there in northern Texas from a different judge that the guidance that the Biden administration is giving to pharmacists is supposedly improper. They shouldn't be giving this guidance. And the guidance is basically that some pharmacists, I don't get into the weeds too much, but it's sort of interesting on this topic. The guidance is that if there's a dual-use pill, a lot of these pharmacists refuse to sell it because they say, well, wait, for all I know, the young woman, it's usually a young woman, the young woman will use it for an abortion, even though she says she's buying it, even though it has this dual use. I'm worried she'll use it to induce an abortion, to end her pregnancy, and I'll be prosecuted. Remember how there's this vigilante law? Still in effect down in Texas. You get your $10,000 reward for being a vigilante, for ratting on somebody, because They're just trying to get an abortion or assist somebody in getting an abortion. So these pharmacists are not filling prescriptions because it's a dual use. And the Biden administration said, no, you can't do that. You can't deny filling a prescription because it's dual use, because you're scared that some overzealous prosecutor or informant is going to go tell on you. They said that the Biden administration could not give that advice to the pharmacists. Now that's being appealed, guess where? Up to the Fifth Circuit again. If they lose in the Fifth Circuit, guess where? The 6-3 U.S. Supreme Court with 3 Trump appointees that already overruled Roe v. Wade and that, made the stop decision. But having said all of that, I do think that some sanity will prevail in this area, but it may not prevail on Friday. This judge may issue or purport to issue this nation. I shouldn't say purport. It's the law until he's overturned. There's a nationwide injunction until it's overturned. If it takes
but you think that appellate judgment will come right away?
For a week, that's the law, Mark. For a week, that's the law in California.
But you think that appellate judgment will come right away to overturn that, is what you're
I think it would come very soon to at least stay the operation of the decision. In other words, the ruling would stand until there was a detailed appeal. But for the moment, it wouldn't be a nationwide injunction. You could still get your package in Southern California if you're 19 years old and your best friend got that and other people that you know did it, and it's safe. I want to emphasize that to people. It's safe. In my opinion, this is all malarkey. They haven't come up with any evidence which shows it's not safe. For 22 years, the FDA has approved this. The Republican and Democratic administrations, women have used it. It's been safe. It's the morning after pill, and it's been deemed safe over and over again. This idea that the FDA does not have jurisdiction because pregnancy is not an illness, that's been rejected by the courts. This is a crackpot argument. It's safe. Women need to know it's safe, and it's been deemed safe for over 20 years.
You talk about they talk about the radical left activist judges. Obviously, that is just ridiculous when you look at it against the backdrop of these right-wing radical Christian right judges and these judgments, and they really threaten a woman's legal agency in this country. Thank you, David Katz. Love having you in. Yeah. We'll talk next Thursday. Thanks so much, my friend.
I have so many.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.